Go. All right, so our mission, which we've chosen to accept, is to discuss the Star Trek effect, whatever the hell that is. By the way, raise your hands if you think you know what the answer to that question is. What is the... Oh! So Michael Nankin will now explain what is the Star Trek effect.
Gee. As I understand it, it's the dynamic in which storytellers imagine the future, present it to an audience, fill their heads with it, and ultimately it becomes a reality.
Isn't he wonderful?
The classical example would be the communicator to the flip phone.
Sure.
The cliche would be that.
Well said. Right? We're together on this, right? Good. Well done. Well done. Now, down to the subset. Imagination gets realized, no, that doesn't say it right. And so we have to get back to Vic and edit his text. No, imagination drives realization. Do we agree with that? Anybody disagree with that? Frank, you got something to say on that?
Oh, just that science fiction creates reality as, we speak and so it becomes. There's a direct relationship between our thoughts and the creation of the universe. That's why we're all really, really powerful, by what we speak.
And think, right? Because that touches the quantum field. Does anybody disagree violently? Good, we can go forward. Now we're out of the introductory phase. Now we're into the actual meat of the project. And then the final bit of the Zen koan of the title here is Smartphones and VR to Space Technology. Does anybody have any idea? Mark, can you translate that into something these people can use?
Smartphones to VR to
it says smartphones and VR to space technology. I think what he's looking for there is the ellipsis.
Everything you look at things as bridges, right? We think about let's say like 3D. When we started seeing 3D movies and things like that, that was really a bridge technology to take us into AR, VR, and get audiences used to the fact that they're not going to be watching things necessarily two-dimensionally any longer. So I think if we look at any piece of technology that we have in our hands today or that we experience today, that's probably a bridge to something that we'll be seeing in the future. We're working on a project with Neil deGrasse Tyson called Space Odyssey. It's a transmedia project. It's immersed in gaming, and it's designed to bring kids of all ages into space and exploration, right? And we use a term called science future, because what we're looking at is expressing ideas in the game that you'll be probably realizing in 100 years. They're prototypical ideas based on real science, real physics. Some could be theoretical, but they're going to be things that really will come to place and come to bear and allow us to get into deep space and allow us to do things like compress time without having to imagine how it happens, but actually start to use real physics to express how it's going to happen. So
that's great.
That's
so
me on a tangent. Sorry.
Once again, we're in this realm where we're by enabling the thinkability of something, we more or less make it inevitable. We all know in the effects area, if you can think it now, you can make it. And what we're all here to explore together is moving into the next dimension, if you will, the immersive dimension. What will we think? What stories are appropriate in this new, multiple new set of media and dimensions? So let's start on that end, and we'll bounce through. Michael?
Yes.
Who are you?
Well, earlier you said you wanted me to talk passionately about myself, but I can't think of a duller topic. So I can talk passionately about what I do.
Please, go ahead.
Which I do feel passionate about. I've been a writer, producer, and director in television and movies for 38 years. That's the people have been paying me to do it. I started when I was 10 years old. So, it's interesting because I'm a Luddite, and I'm sitting here in this room with all of these brilliant tech people, and for me, virtual reality is Tom Edison making movies of people. I mean, that's a virtual reality, and I feel that I'm very proud to be a professional storyteller. I still can't. I wake up in the morning and I can't believe that people still pay me to do it. And as an aside, my advice to everyone is find a job where you feel that way. But I had an experience. The first TV show I ever worked on was a show called Life Goes On. This is 1989. And it was a show about a family show with about a family who had a Down syndrome teenager. And I'd never worked in television, and I went into the show as a writer, and when I was first started, they had an episode that came up short. They said, Nankin, write a scene, we'll shoot it tomorrow. We'll flesh out the episode. And the topic of the episode was homelessness, which I had some very strong feelings about, and ideas that I wanted to explore. And I sat down and I wrote a scene. I stayed up all night and I wrote this scene. And the next day they shot it. And 5 days later, 12.5 million people watched it. And so we're talking about thought, word, deed, the Holy Trinity, and how things manifest in the world. And I thought, I just looked into my own heart, had a feeling about this topic, about the people, and now that feeling and that idea is in 12.5 million heads. Whether they'll accept it or reject it, or whether it'll make any difference in the world, who knows? But that was such a heady experience. I mean, think about it.
And that's what's special about you. You thought about it. You actually
think about that. That's more people than have ever seen a Shakespeare play.
Sure.
And so what we have now is, you're getting me started on I'm getting on my horse now. I'm getting on my horse now. So that got me, that was a pivotal moment in my life, and it really got me going along this track of, we, and say we, all of us in this room, who make content or deliver content to more than 10 people, we have this technology now where we can cover the earth in our ideas. It's never happened in human history. It's never happened. And we're only like 1 century into this experiment of what moving pictures do, virtual reality, right? And so I've tried to be very responsible with that. And I talk a lot about, you can't just put anything out there. So I guess I'm now talking to all the content creators in the room. That sending it out there is a privilege. And we have to take, there are lots of people who don't care about this and will send anything out there. But I would say, I want to, this is turning into a political speech. But think about what you put in the world. Mind or heart, word, deed, what goes out? What do you want to manifest in the world?
all of this is about thinkability, right? I mean, politics is in fact, shaping what everybody thinks. I mean, Emerson said long ago, been dead for 200 years, a revolution begins as an idea in one person's mind, and when it's an idea in another person's mind, the revolution is completed. So we're all in the revolution or in the transformation business. Be responsible. The only place people are going to make money right now is porn and first-person shooter games. And on a week of active shooting, as it were, that's not a proud thing to say about the species.
Maybe that's another shadow, because the de-differentiation, we were the one and all in our mother's wombs, and then when we were born, we differentiated ourselves, and we keep differentiating ourselves. So the idea of contraction and expansion, whenever we expand, we have to be civil. When we expanded across this country as pioneers, now that we're going into space, we better be civil to ET. And the fact is that we weren't really civil to
the bison or the natives, right?
And so our expansion, always in the chrysalis stage of the butterfly, what kind of violence is done in those transitions? So how can we have civility around those around us to not harm as we're expanding? So expansion and contraction are a real interesting theme.
Good ones, and that brings us to Mark and what you're doing and your purpose in doing it.
This is, as much about storytelling and defining a future for young scientists, I think, as much as anything. And it was there's an interesting panel earlier that was talking really about kind of the battle for science, right? Legitimacy in science. And the project that we're doing with Neil deGrasse Tyson is called Space Odyssey, and it's a multi-platform gaming experience. It's designed to encourage kids of all ages to get into space and exploration. And in doing that, we've brought along a really robust collection of collaborators. Neil's a partner in the project, but that also brings along with us some of the Star Talk All-Stars, astronaut Mike and Jenna Levin, and some terrific science minds. But the key idea here is to engage and entertain and really bring people into what the real possibility of innovation, to inspire and excite. And when Marty and I were talking on the phone yesterday, he said, I think that's as much a visual conversation as we look at content, and he's right. The conversations that we've had as we start to build out the game experience really are conversations about where we've been and where we want to go to. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're looking at 100 years in the future is about what you're playing in our game, right? But we look at the designs of Sid Mead, we look at the designs of Mobius, we look at the designs of optimism, of excitement, of vibrancy, of the human condition, and placing that to create diversity, right? Because we look at in playing our game, you're part of a galactic coalition. The only way for us to succeed in space and succeed in science is as a collection of humanity, right? As a diverse collection of humanity. And so when we even look at putting together visual elements of the game, we look at bringing in a robust group of artists, from around the world that have different viewpoints, that have different ideas about what things will look like, what's really cool. And that's how we're going to engage a younger audience, is showing them what's cool and inspiring them to tell us what's cool. When we started the idea of building the game, what we decided to do was open a Kickstarter that was really designed just to build a coalition of young designers and young ideas and young minds to help inform what we put together. We are combining things like VR and AR into the experience. But the real idea behind this is innovation, inspiration, possibility. It all works on real science, real physics, because we don't want to deceive people. This isn't about science fiction, this is about science future. So we look at prototypes, things that Misha Kaku has talked about, Neil's talked about, the exploration of the distillation of time, of magnetism, as an energy source. Lots of different ideas, but all of them have to be understandable and accessible. And so that's what we're looking to achieve. That's what the key component is here. And that's why we're looking at a strong collaborative base, and a number of voices to really kind of express as fully as possible.
That's inspiring. That's great. Allison Wynn, what are you doing?
Well, I am really passionate about VR and space. I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here, but just to riff on the Neil deGrasse Tyson, I recently saw this podcast with Katy Perry and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and she was interviewing him and asked Neil, and I don't think Katy, she may not have gone to high school. She didn't need to. She's got so much talent. She's a great singer. But hey, I don't understand, what's the difference between math and science? Isn't it one and the same? And I don't think it's necessarily a Katie question. It's a very mainstream question, right, about science, math, STEAM, that not enough of our young people have this type of education in STEAM and coming.
Define STEAM. Tell everybody.
So a lot of people talk about STEM. I kind of like to think of it as STEAM. If you heard my previous talk at 2:30, I went through it. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And I think that's very important in VR, because VR requires all those things, right? Because it requires the visual, it requires the acoustic, it requires the physics, It requires the math. It requires the engineering. It requires the glue, the multitasking, the optics to put everything together in an experience for VR, MR, AR, storytelling, and bring that alive, right? And so, I mean, one of the ways I got here is because I was a big Star Trekkie growing up, and I love the holodeck. I can't talk about other people. All I can talk is about, you know, my own experience. And I am who I am today because I have to say Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, you know, those are very instrumental in me getting into STEAM, my perspective, my holistic approach, and how I want to glue technology together. Because if you're just thinking about like traditional tech companies, oh, Google, well, we have a better algorithm to do search. We have, you know, this is procedurally generated to create a better system for you to do what? Well, with VR, it is very holistic, right? And this is kind of like the modern age of computing. And for us to kind of solve really interesting problems in education to end poverty, we kind of need to, you know, take some of the vision from the, you know, the oracles, the storyteller over here, right? And what I saw with the holodeck was really like a vision of how to do education for me. Education right now, you know, is kind of being kicked around by Peter Thiel. Hey, you don't need to go to college. Why do you want to sit down and listen to someone talk when you can make money, right? It's classroom lectures. You're only going to take in 20% of what the teacher tells you. But the research shows if you can live it, it's tactile, if you can experience, like in the holodeck, it's basically simulator, right? The research shows that in a simulator, that's how they train astronauts. That's how they train Air Force naval pilots operating on million-dollar equipment. That's the best way to learn, right? So you can assess, you actually learn, you know, you retain it 80% more. So to get a college education normally takes you 4 years. In a simulator, you can have that same training in 1 year.
Maybe less.
Maybe less. How will that affect the number of people who are trained in STEAM, so that way we can have enough engineers and scientists to get Elon Musk or me to Mars,
Sure, more likely
or to
you.
possibly end poverty in the world, right? Not to even think about escaping the atmosphere of the Earth. More pressing issues, you know, millions, billions, 1 billion people on Earth don't have enough clean water. They don't have enough food to eat, right? They don't even have shelter. How are we going to solve that without the proper STEAM education? Fundamentally, it's through education, and to me, the solution is through a simulator, right? That is a holodeck. I first saw that, I was like, yes, that's how we should do it.
No, there's some
Bless
really,
you.
there's some really great initiatives too that are being, you know, undertaken. Like the First Robotics is a great program. You know, it really primes and drives students towards technology. You know, we did a short documentary a few years back with a girls robotics team from San Diego, and it was really just meant to be kind of a simple thing for Teen Vogue, and then it kept winning and winning and winning and winning. And we went to the championships in Atlanta, and we were able to get some time with Dean Kamen, who was sponsoring the event. And it was really great to talk to him because his, you know, vision and his goal was to get students away from thinking about, hey, if I just become a professional athlete, you know, I'll make millions of dollars and my life will be set. You know, he said, no, if you hit the books and you study science, study math, you know, become a scientist, become an engineer, you can make a great life for yourself and you can create a legacy that will benefit humanity. You know, you can solve some of these problems like purifying water in third world countries and getting you into space and things like that. You know, it's like, but it's those other voices, and it's supporting those other voices like Dean Kamen in the First Robotics program, you know, the STEAM program, those kind of things that are the biggest argument, I think, biggest defense of science, you know, against ignorance.
Bless you. Also, great. God, how inspiring. Jeez. We're going to have to say a
Well,
bracha at
I
the
took
end
in
of
100% of what you said.
this. Well said. Well written.
And wait until they start programming in bioluminescence. I mean, you know, just because we're programming in silicon right now,
Oh,
and
yeah.
carbon's right next to it on the periodic
Silicon is
table.
slow. Silicon is slow. Carbon is fast. That's why we're not made of
I mean,
silicon.
I want a little leopard tail, but, you know, getting into the ethical issues around that is something, you know, has gone back to, you know, geneticists reorganizing the patterns on butterfly wings as painting. So, you know, there's artists intervening in all types of spaces from the genetic to, you know, beyond. But I think for virtual reality to imprint the DNA, to imprint the synapses working more biologically, because if we look at cuttlefish and octopus and the way they change the color of their skin, when we can map RGB signals to that kind of material, I think there's going to be incredibly rich, because we can only do it in vector right now, because I don't know all the technology in VR, but I'd love to learn. And I bet it's
We'll get to that.
vector-based, right? Isn't it vector-based?
Well, it's not vector-based
Not
necessarily. It depends.
Okay.
It depends on what the display is
Anyway, I'm sorry.
on your cell phone. It's not.
It's
I
all
think this is
triangles at the end of the day.
Right.
Like, that's
Which
how
is
the
vectors.
GPU kind of eats it
more
up. So
triangles,
just
more
think about that as
polygons.
the.
And we got plenty of them. This is Frank Pietronigro. And tell us a bit first, some background stuff, then take us
Okay, sure.
Take us to space.
Well, just, you know, I'm an artist, a painter, but I ventured to NASA in 1998. I had a dream in 1974 to have my paintings float in the middle of the air. So at that time, being a product of the 1950s, I was looking for zero gravity chambers at the Ben Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, where I grew up, and I found out quickly there weren't any, and I had to go to NASA. Procrastinator, I waited until 1986. I started developing a joint endeavor agreement and ultimately wound up painting in zero gravity, which I'll show you some video. Some of the themes for me are potlatch, sharing. You know, economics in certain parts of the world aren't based on how much I can acquire, but how much I can give away. For me, activism, and I'm an activist, a queer activist my whole life. I can't help but be an activist given resistance of swimming upstream, but I believe my work should leave a legacy of hope. Collaboration is the basis that fosters all my greater democracy. So I really feel that it's through the displacement of my voice. And so when I painted in weightlessness, I used pastry bags. I also fan danced. I took these flags, and this is authentic queer cultural production from you know, gay nightclubs. Guys would be sweating, and they would take off their shirts, and they'd be in nightclubs. And so, you know, we hand sewed curtain weight, so it was a domestic tool to hand sew these. And then
Can we get a demonstration?
Oh yeah.
Did you really?
Music?
Did they use not?
Marty?
It's like cuttlefish, but I did that in weightlessness, and it was suggested me not to go into the other culture by being so flamboyant. But so I decided to take my magic wand, because with the pastry bags, I had pastry bags, and I filled them with acrylic gel medium, but metals. So the idea was really to disco, right? Exactly. Well, we want to bring together Electric Daisy Carnival to the spaceports and do suborbital live interactive
I thought
space
you meant
cast.
here. I was like, oh
I don't
my
have enough time to do it, so
Bring
they can all
EDC
take these
here,
ideas.
right
but-
now.
Live interactive space cast with people contributing from their cell phones, text messages, tweets to a chorus, and I'll show you some images of it. But anyway, I thought magnetism would work. Actually, in 1998, we were hoping, and I got NASA to give me an uplink, a downlink, and then a link to the Exploratorium in San Francisco, but they had just done an eclipse from the Aruba, and they didn't have time staff-wise to show the live webcast from the parabolic flight, which is what we wanted to do in 1998. And the reason was that I wanted to create a user interface on the computer so people could choose a button. And if there were magnets in the space and you put metal in the paint, it would cause the material to float back and forth. In any case, I need to find a nice material engineer in science, if any of you know one, because we need to create new materials for these kinds of projects. In any case, access is important. Public-private spaces and this concept of expansion, plus multicultural, interdisciplinary, interactive, and intergenerational. I think it's really important if we look back at, you know, all of our lives. We need everyone from every generation. I just want to say thanks to some of my friends like Daniel Faber. He's the CEO of Space Arena. We're going to make a movie on teaching people how to actually use microgravity. If you're going to go off into space, do you know what it's really like to float in weightlessness? You'll see in a minute what it's like. And it's a whole new world, and we have to learn how to be in it. So I think education is really important to inspire a younger generation. Consequently, we're running a Kickstarter campaign right now. If you go to Kickstarter, usually they say, don't take out your phones. Okay, take out your phones and go to Kickstarter. It's a blatant commercial, and just type in ZGAC. And go to YouTube first and type in ZGAC. There you will see the ZGAC Steam screen. ZGAC for Zero Gravity Arts Consortium. I'm the co-founder and chief visionary officer for this entity. We have a parabolic flight program for artists, a space artists education program. We have an international conference program. But
Make sure everybody knows about the Vomit Comet, right? You know about this?
Comet,
right?
jet,
Anybody doesn't know about how you
5.
generate zero G, and you take a jet up to 30, 40, 50,000 feet, and you drop it in a parabolic arc, and there is up to 3 minutes. That's how they did Apollo 13. They built those sets inside the Vomit Comet, as they call it, because something like half the people who go up puke and when they get into, zero G. But they built those sets, and they did all those scenes with Tom Hanks zipping through, and also they used it in Gravity, in the movie Gravity.
Also used it in the opening crash sequence in The Mummy.
Who here saw The Mummy? Oops.
So floating graffiti in weightlessness is another way that we can entertain one another if we're traveling on a trip to Mars. I found a book produced by a queer artist in Paris, France, and I took some of his graffiti. I cut it up, and on my second flight from Bob Hope Airport, which was really cool, during the International Space Development Conference, we flew, we practiced, then presented. And we're going to do that again next year at the International Space Development Conference. Our Kickstarter project is creating movies. We want to inspire young people, and I loved what he was saying, getting as many people as possible to make movies. We've done this for 3 years now. We have about 70, 80 movies that are exquisite, that combine the themes of the International Space Development Conference with the passion of young people imagining their culture going off planet. Are we going to take our pets to space? Yes. How are you going to create an astronaut uniform for your cats? Like things like this need to be really considered. Because, in any case, so I floated the graffiti in weightlessness to talk about interactivity. These are analog. You want to see some movies?
What cat is going to want to wear a spacesuit?
No, I mean, if we're going to take
Cat's going to shiv you.
How is it? So, let's see, there's Battlestar
Tomorrow night we're
Galactica.
going to have an astronaut at that dinner if you guys are coming, and we'll probably have some things to say about cats.
Oh, that's okay. This is just titleables. It says investigating the creative process in a microgravity environment. Oh, there we go. And I was so pleased to show you where to fly. This was my artist studio. This is Ellington Field. You're actually the first audience to see this in full resolution. I used to have a great day for a flight.
I'm the only one who can't see.
And 3 weeks for a flight. This is the case of 135. The value of what we did was to help reduce stress and decrease boredom. I worked with NASA's leading chief neuroscientists. To decrease stress and boredom. I may never stress and not bored, but I try to.
Could you imagine if it increased stress? That would be great.
So this is the KC-135, and as of course everything floats away, I was in the back of the jet. I should have been up front. You know how things don't go according to plan. I don't know how they can keep
This is
everyone
changing
alive
over and
in
he's
space
swirling
station.
all around.
I don't want to kick you, I'm sorry.
No, you didn't kick me, babe.
Shuri, now I'm throwing up.
We're just floating. We're hanging.
Shuri Santiago.
So is this microphone.
From
Uh, let's see here.
we were
Whoa. Here we go.
died.
I'm doing great so far.
Where are Frank's goggles? Which one? They're in his backpack. The blue one.
This is my age, right? This is how long ago it was. I wore pants, and I was putting this pants up inside the jet, not the
got this other white on.
Need some help, Clovis?
That's the remnants of that. But in the end, everything kind of turned brown, so it was kind of an interesting association,
All
right?
right.
Because artists work with all these
Sorry.
associations. This was a bag, but it's like being in my mother's home.
Yeah.
This was the very
That's
first
okay.
time I've flown since I was in the embryonic sac. So that was amazing.
Let's pick up these bags and get them in one area.
You know, again, you don't even have time to throw up. And they gave us scopolamine and dexedrine. And this is Burke Fort. He's in charge of, this was a federal grant. We flew, there were 4 other artists that flew. I made sure I was the last one to go, not first. I used pastry bags. Like I said. I can crush
There you go,
your head.
Bert.
Or I can shut up.
Hey, Bert. Can you get me right now? Nope. Just press the transmit. And do what?
Sorry.
Now what you're not seeing is the 2G forces from the jet moving up.
All right. Okay, you guys. Whoa, look at that.
So she was supposed to be commenting on this.
Okay, I can.
Now, we were canceled 3 weeks before we were ready to fly. The politics of
Okay.
science are really important.
Get this microphone clipped on again.
No, you're not doing science here. This is something other. You're making a movie. You can't make a movie because the producers of the film Armageddon tried to get an approval. They weren't allowed to produce movies, so you're not going for a big movie. But they said in order to fly, you have to take the knowledge and make it to larger audiences. They didn't know I worked for the Discovery Channel. That's a producer. They broadcast television production. And for me, I went to an international national campaign like SNAP, and NASA could not control that. But it was flying after Good Morning America left, there we were flying our science, because I was studying fluid dynamics, the law of conservation of angular momentum, and the collision of hard and soft objects. But as an artist, I knew I was creating drift paintings. Now, economically, the paint flows into the air, and gravity goes back. What happens to it? And economically, in Marxist terms, there's either use value or exchange value. And this situation, and this relates to the French artists in Paris, France in 1968, the Situationists Internationale, look them up. They created situations to change democracy and improve people's lives. So in this case, what happened to me was that it fell out of the air. I appropriated what Jackson Pollock did, but there's nothing to buy.
Sorry,
Someone
I'm
said to me,
losing this
actually, it
mic,
was the wife of Peter,
and I keep
the
being
wife,
unable
George
to speak.
Whitesides,
Anyway,
the founder of Yuri's
But I
Night
must say-
at ISDC in St. Louis. She said to me, you have to stop talking like that. You made fabulous art here. You have to stop saying you subverted capitalism because the painting fell out of the air and nobody could buy anything. Aha, you see my computer, you see, it's hot. Then it just is down in slow motion. Do you like it that way? It's better when we leave it on that way. Look at that. This is my back computer. It's just overloaded. As you can see, just like me. But, so, you know, the politics of art and science were really strong here, but at the local level, all the people at NASA really knew that this was important. And they welcomed us in. I must tell you, our space agencies are really open to we, the American public. They are. When you made the comment the other day about resistance, yes, indeed, they cut our project off because they couldn't control the publicity. And that in 1998, you can understand that. And don't ask, don't tell. You know, like when I was doing this, I wasn't, you know, in space. I was just doing this. And so, you know, those kinds of things are really important. And the naming conventions, I call this a tabernacle. You know, a place of worship. Artists should cite their basis, their art, on the basis of ritual, because it's culture. And so when we go to Mars, what rituals are we going to take? What, you know, what kinds of art forms will we take? And how will this inspire a new generation to, you know, really love what we're doing? Now I'm going to shut up and end this. And you can actually go to the YouTube site and thank you for listening to all of that.
Isn't that great? That's cool stuff, right? I love the slow-mo. It looked embryonic, right? It did. So, comments from the gallery?
comments. Oh my God,
It's hard for us to see.
it's so beautiful.
Are you speechless? Come on. Yeah, right. The
Well,
coveralls were
there's an
brilliant.
artist called Joseph Beuys, and he was a German artist, and he crashed somewhere after World War II, and people found him, and they covered him in fat and felt. And so he did a work of art about, I really respect Joseph Beuys insofar as the fact that it's about social relations. All of this is about social relations. It's all about interacting, no matter what media it is.
It is.
And we have to be civil and courteous and loving and kind, because our shadows are the opposite of that. The good king is the high chair tyrant.
Just to enunciate some of the
good
themes that
queen.
he offered us before.
On the other hand,
The Gift. There's a marvelous book by a guy named Marcel Mauss, a French sociologist, on The Gift. The Gift, this is a wonderful thing, the business of the potlatch. The gift is a way of showing moral superiority. In fact, all of us feel that, a little bit of a frisson of that when we give gifts, whether it's Hanukkah, Christmas, birthdays, right? There's a little moment of, it's not one-upsmanship, but it is a moral superiority thing. I give you a gift, right? It's an amazing human thing, speaking of interrelations, and it's a marvelous theme for everything we do. So his themes: potlatch, activist, hope, access, interaction, and multi-generational, multiracial, those are great themes. That's righteous stuff. That's wonderful. Okay, so I want to use maybe 5 or 7 more minutes. Mike, you have something you're going to show, right?
I can talk about it without even
Go ahead.
showing it.
Do it.
Because it seems that this conference of technology has horrible technology.
Not the only one that has that.
Yeah, but look at all we had to put into it.
oh, it'll come up.
No, let me talk. We'll see if somehow it needs to be illustrated, but maybe it doesn't. I think I was just, the Star Trek effect, going back to that for a moment. I was thinking about initially technology, and there's, and that story's been told a lot about how Jules Verne invented the submarine, and many of these storytellers were able to crack open the future, or at least come up with things that made sense based on their contemporary technology, and predict or guide or suggest what actual technology would be. But I found that I was thinking about Star Trek, and there was something else that Star Trek offered us that we ultimately became in some way, and that was Star Trek offered us a world in which we had gone past race and nationality.
Right.
And we were pretty well on that track until January 20th. So I started thinking about, it's yes, stories can lead us to the stars. Stories can inspire us to go to the stars. But who will we be when we get there? Is the voyage out need to be a voyage in? We've never, as a race, gone to a brand new place together. We've gone, packs of us have gone to new places on this planet, but we've never, at this state of evolution or devolution, depending on your opinion, have all gone somewhere. And so, what are we bringing? How will it change us? How will we change it? And, so I have been thinking along the lines of, well, actually, I should show this clip. So I'm going to show this clip from Battlestar Galactica, and let me set it up. So for those of you who don't know, Battlestar Galactica is a show. It takes place. It seems like the future. It's actually
Cylons are bad.
Ultimately the past. And Cylons are bad. They're a race of robots who are indistinguishable from humans, who we have created, who have turned against us. There's a movie out right now about that.
Yeah. Is it on now?
Just a second. So that's the setup, and there's a character named Starbuck, who's this blonde woman that you'll see. So wait, hold on, wait, don't, turn it off for a second, and then I have to jump to the scene. So anyway, the story of this episode was this character Starbuck ventures out into space to have a personal experience and a spiritual experience. And the background for that experience is that she, ever since she was a child, has drawn repetitively this circular image. She was an artist, and she was constantly drawing this multicolored mandala. And then it was discovered that people had been drawing that for hundreds of years in their culture, and that she was tapped into that in some way. And so, in this scene you're about to see, the fleet has gone to this Jupiter-like planet. They're refueling the fleet. They're constantly on the lookout for Cylons who are going to come and destroy them. And she's out sort of riding the fences and making sure everything's cool until the following happens. So if you can jump to...
This sounds ominous.
Jump to 11:42 and play it.
Uh-oh.
It's that slow computer.
It's slow-mo.
We've had a couple valve failures, restart the unwrap.
And you'll see credits over this. It's the beginning of the show, so I didn't choose it because my name's on it.
Hot dog, what the hell are you doing?
Johnny Flynn guys again. That's the only thing I miss about New Africa.
Let's get started. Showtime, Bobby. I'm right for you. Even stupid 45. Committing.
Starbuck, hot dog, no joy. Press!
One gun grab. I don't go fuel lines immediately.
Refueling ships Galactica. Immediate. Cease all underway replenishment ops.
So we got both Starbuck and Hot Dog on Dreas. No contact from the bogey.
I'm not even can see anything. That planet synchrotron radiation has been kicking the crap out of every greatest in our fleet since we got here.
Price you pay for a good place to hide and refuel the fleet.
Looks like it's also a good place for hiding a Cylon raider.
Starbuck, what do you got?
We got one turkey playing hide and seek in the crowd. Don't scare us. Engage your fences.
One in the raider, no fighter anymore.
Still no bandits on Dreas.
If that bastard jumps, the Cylons could be all over us in minutes.
I'd like the fleet to stand by for emergency jump.
Damn it, Starbuck blind! I say again, I lost you in the clouds!
Affirmative, he's hiding in the clouds. He just stepped into the storm system.
What the hell is that raider?
Sir, Starbuck's docking close to the planetary hard deck. If he stays on course, the atmospheric density will keep him from reaching orbit again.
Then the pressure will crush her like a cheap soda can.
Starbuck, you're getting too low. Break off the line. I repeat, Starbuck, you're getting too low. Break off the line. Starbuck, pull out before you don't have the space to regain orbit. Come in.
Where the hell's she going?
that's it. So turn it off there. So this is.
What? I felt the impact. The impact was all hit very long.
So there's a lot of.
You can watch the rest of the
flash and
episode.
noise and that, but it's really, it's, I sort of use it to illustrate the point about how personal space can be. And this is an episode where she ultimately saw the flashes where she's she's suddenly in a living room, and she is going to sort of go out and go back in time and work out her mother issues in this episode.
Reminiscent of Contact, and even
in some way, yeah,
right?
A little bit before, I think. Contact, yeah.
Okay, so all of this set of skills and storytelling now becomes embedded in what's described frequently as an emotive technology. Tom Verness, one of the grandpappies of VR, long ago described virtual reality as a transportation system for the senses. But the thing, Alison, what you were saying in the women's discussion of VR is that this intermodal, intersensory thing is much more. The synesthesia, the interplay of the senses, is something that, well, on the creative side, women have an advantage because your brains are wired better than ours, the male side, for this multisensory thing and for keeping track of multiple stuff going on. But it's really going to push the envelope, at least as much as Starbuck was pushing her envelope, creatively, to both responsibly and effectively tell stories inside this new emotive transportation system for all of the senses simultaneously. We got about 20 minutes. If there's anybody, anything to wrap up from our thing, let's do it now. And then within 5 minutes, I want to go to them.
Sure. And we were talking about the VR stuff, and actually that's something that we're working with on the Space Odyssey project is creating unique missions that happen in an immersive space. And we're really fortunate. We'll be working with a terrific production company, Framestore. We're really excited about that, and they've done exceptional work with Gravity and a ton of other projects. So some of the things that we'll be looking at are identifying unique experiences that you would have in exploring space, and what those mean immersively, and then what those mean also educationally too.
I think it's really cool that you're doing that in a simulated environment as one of the best ways for people to learn. Hopefully Katy Perry will, use it. But what's really interesting to me, kind of riffing on what everyone's saying, and this is a new project of mine, which started out as VR in space to basically okay, well, we're doing this simulation to teach people, but what about bringing people to space? I want to go to space, but it's so expensive and it's very dangerous. What's the next best thing? How can we be Starbuck in space? How can we explore space, right? Well, one of the best ways is to actually teleoperate a VR device, a VR, type robot in space, so that way you feel stereoscopically that you're there in 3D with 360, and then you can operate it from the safety of your home, of your work. I think that will kind of be the next step into space exploration. We might not get to Star Trek possibly in my lifetime. Well, I mean, I might go to Mars with Elon Musk when I'm 90 years old. But one way we can do that is through this telerobotics with a VR type experience. And I'm really excited about that. One of the first tangible baby step I'm doing that is to launch a nano satellite. So in low Earth orbit, instead of billions of dollars to launch something in high Earth orbit, that's something that's accessible to me and you, a 1U, to launch a 1U nanosat that's 8 centimeters squared is roughly $100,000, right? Well, we might not have that in our savings, but if we work, we save enough, and, and we gather our resources, that's something that people can do. And the team that I've worked with has done that in the past, and we're planning to send a telescope. Originally, we wanted to do a 360 VR camera. Another company is doing that, but it's facing a lot of issues with bandwidth, with latency. Okay, so now we're talking about science fiction. We're bringing it into reality. The reality is that the K-band, the 15 gigahertz band, is not able to stream the 360 VR feed, right? And so
K-band is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum dedicated to space communications, and the speed, any of you who have tried to do any kind of wireless VR know that you're talking about, really high. I mean, we're not talking about 6 megahertz. You're talking about 90 or more to do any kind of decent resolution. So this is massive. They could do it in Korea, but we can't do it in space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you think about the International Space Station, we can't even get a regular live feed of the astronauts talking to us. There is, significant lag sometimes depending on their orbit, several minutes or, several hours delay. So the technology is not quite there yet, but there are ways that we can personalize the space experience with the nanosats. We can put telescopes there, for example, and make that as a viable business model and allow astronomers, hobbyists, researchers to teleoperate those telescopes from Earth, and it offers a very clear-cut case study why that's better and more attractive economically than doing it on Earth. Basically, because you don't have to deal with day-night cycles, you don't have to deal with pollution, light pollution, occlusion with clouds, et cetera, et cetera. But these are kind of real-world kind of constraints that, it's kind of like a different character in the storyline. And, the cool thing with science fiction is that you guys are the dreamers. You can think about all the things 100 years, 10,000 years in the future, and then people like me, the scientists and the engineers today, then we have to deal with the real physics. We have to deal with the gravity, and we make it a reality. So it's very exciting, but I do apologize. It's it's a little bit slower than what you may be used to because you're watching these movies and these TV shows. But
one comment on that:
it builds on what you were talking about earlier, though. I mean, it really becomes great support curriculum because you can do this day or night. So students in classrooms can basically be operating a telescope, in space, and it doesn't matter. They're not occluded by the sun. It doesn't, there's not the issue that they would have if they're trying to do it, in the daytime, just looking through a telescope.
Right, and it gives them that freedom like they're in space because if you're in North America, you never be able to see Alpha Centauri, right? But with our teleoperated telescopes, it's, on a north-south orbit, then you can see things that you would never have been able to see, just like if you were in space.
And you have the control. I mean, they have the literal control to do that, from their classroom. It's a pretty remarkable idea.
From the classroom, from a science center, from a discovery center.
Exactly. From Marty's house,
From my garage. Okay, turning it to you. Questions, comments, complaints? Yes.
I have a question for Mike. Are you going back for a season short of Van Helsing?
I did. It's all in the can.
It's all done?
As a matter of fact, it premiered last week.
I feel like there's a real
This is Van Helsing we're talking about.
I think there's a real correlation.
Well, we're going to influence vampires in the future.
We can talk afterwards about Stan's story this season that I'm pretty angry about. But I think there's a real correlation between, like, if you're going to Mars, who gets to get on the boat? And also, if you're in a zombie or vampiric apocalypse, like, who do you want on your boat? like, and who you take with you, and exploring those themes through those shows, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And the perception of who may not be worthy of going on the boat.
Right, and then who do you become once you're trapped on a boat?
Right. Yeah.
Who's the most delicious to zombies and vampires is probably works in the calculation.
That's the criteria.
You know, economically, I don't think $110 million is that expensive. It's just fuel. And I actually believe the reality of going to space. And we will be able to go to the moon for brunch in another 20 or 30 years. So let's get real about the fact that 100 years ago, if I was asked to start a space arts education class, they would go, hey, where's the numbers? What kind of employability? I've been asked this, and I said, well, this is like talking to Henry Ford in 1820 about how many people are going to be working in the automobile industry. It's going to be millions. You know, let's get real. The conceptions haven't caught up with the reality. And I think this is kind of like public record, right? So just for the public record, I want to say that I had a Carnegie Mellon Fellowship, and I was in one of these great buildings back there, and I actually came up with the word STEAM. And we used it in NASA Ames in 2007 when we threw a party for 50,000 people on the tarmac. It was from 6 at night to 6 in the morning. It was a Yuri's Night celebration, and we showed the ZGAC STEAM screen, which I'll show one more movie from it, that was in front of all these steam pipes. And we coined it for economic reasons. If we just keep STEM, then artists and musicians should not be paid as much as engineers and scientists. And economically, we need to bring up the fact that artists are just as valuable as this equation, as are the engineers and scientists. And we could posit that it's the imagination of the artist that actually helps it's symbiotic.
Enables.
We're one and the same.
It's a resonance, right? And I think we all agree on that. By the way, did we do okay on that Zen koan of a title? Did we link VR and space and the need for imagination to drive technology? Yes or no? Rate it. Come on. Okay, more questions.
As long as he's happy.
Complaints?
Did we connect all the dots?
Did we connect the dots?
Okay.
We connected the
I was
polygons.
creating a bridge. Remember? That was creating a bridge.
So from the panel, anybody have any final thoughts besides we're going to get to the last movie and Michael? Valedictory? Anything?
Oh my God! Final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, no. But it's been spiritual so far. So keeping that.
Keeping that vein. Okay. No, there's just so much to say, and I think I've said everything I wanted to say here today. So
Good.
Thank you all for.
That's what Jane Goodall said last night. By the way, see Jane, the movie, Jane. Oh, it's awesome. It's ridiculous. It's so great. It's so wonderful. I happened to see it with Philip Glass conducting a 78-piece orchestra, with the live, like the old days of movies, except they would do it with a single piano. It's awesome. Crazy. Sir.
I just, what resonates with what we're doing and what I think is the message that we're trying to move towards, and I think is probably, works within what we're talking about with storytelling in space and the future and VR, is moving away from dystopia towards hope. Creating the idea of possibility, innovation, exploration, but hope. That's what drives us in the end, right? And I think that's the narrative takeaway from what we're working on, personally, our team, and what I think we probably want to deliver to, another generation is the idea of hope.
I love that. I would love to see an artist go into space. I think I was talking to Marty about this, not just like a science and engineer. I know we had the teacher that blew up back in the 80s. Sorry for bringing that up. But I think it'd be really amazing to have someone like Will.i.am. I really want to. I think Elon Musk is doing a great job with bringing the space industry into the household arena, but we really need to have a brand name artist or a regular artist that people can relate to and say, hey, that's not just a nerd or a geek going to space, right? My third grade son is really into space. No, space is very personalized. It's something that is spiritual, that we can relate to, and we can learn so much about. So, if you guys have any volunteers who are artists here who want to go into space, I think we should do a Kickstarter and send that person to space.
Or just
maybe Katy Perry. Katy Perry
would be awesome. The theory behind that, and this is spoiler alerts. Again, you guys don't have to go to dinner tomorrow night. McLuhan said that the artist is the distant early warning system for the senses. That the artist looks ahead and prepares us to see and feel things that are not or have not yet been perceptible. Monet turns up. We talked about this, right at the time when photography is coming into vogue, and all of that pixelated stuff that we saw in the 1870s and 1880s is, as it were, commentary on a technology that's then being implemented. If you don't send artists yonder, and if all you get back is, whoa, look at that sunrise, by some engineer from Ohio, not that there's anything wrong with Ohio or engineers, but vision, that's not what they train those people for. So if we don't feel it, and most of us who are as old as I, and there are very few in this room, we were excited about space because it was, it was the new ocean, right? We're losing the millennials. They're not as excited. And coincidentally, NASA's budget is far less as a percentage of GDP than it used to be. And I'm just talking about the moon program. I'm talking about in general. If you don't make this stuff perceptible, you won't care about it. And you won't, if you're not passionate about it, you won't push for it. So we have actually a vital interest, those of us who love and are enticed by exploration in space, in getting something up there, Will.i.am and Disagree, and Katy Perry even better, to send us back the multi-sensory experience of being there. Not just, I'm thrown up now, or look at that sunrise, but to feel it so that not just we want to go, because most of us, 99.99%, are only going to be able to simulate this for the imaginable future. Someday with railguns and whatnot, and maybe if we happen to be around as a species in 200 years, I think we're going to crack the code on gravity. A lot of us will go. For the time being, my motto about space is clean up your room and you can go outside. We got to fix the Earth before we get to really go in large numbers. But meanwhile, I want to know what's out there. And Frank, you get the last word.
I just want to say thank you. It's been wonderful to live through this with all of you. I've learned so much, and I want to invite you to come up and say hello to me. I want to invite you to participate in ZGAC. We want artists to learn how to fly in weightlessness. We have parabolic flight projects for artists. We develop your conceptualization skills. We teach you about accessing space agencies. Join us. Come to ISDC, the International Space Development Conference of the National Space Society next May at LAX at the Sheridan Gateway. We'll be showing more movies there. And so I want to show one from a young person who is motivated. There are 100 movies like this. I teach After Effects at the Academy. I used to. I'm moving on to other things, and I love teaching. So I was teaching After Effects. This movie was done, and there's 100 of them, and you can see them at the ZGAC YouTube channel. But this is just one, and it's a student's vision of culture in space. So I think it's an appropriate ending to hear from a young person who studied After Effects with me for 10 weeks. So how many of you program in After Effects? So you know what it's like. So this is after 10 weeks of designing. They did great. That's me making sounds.
We're live?
Oh, shit. Sorry for the French.
Okay, good.
Yes.
No, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Sorry.
Spill light.
I tell my students, sorry, I can't. I have to just, there we go. So that was after 3 weeks in After Effects, right? Whoa, that's
Nice
in
job.
Charlotte. Pretty
Well, thank you, you wonderful people, Frank and Allison, Mark and Michael, for your clarity, your inspiration, your spirituality, and thank you all. And as they joke to adolescent kids, go make good choices, but actually go make ethical products in VR.